Get the Intel, the podcast meant for those of us trying to find out what the hell is going on in the field. Here, we discuss tools, techniques, and approaches that you can implement to streamline operations and let you focus on your craft.
Well, welcome to the show. This is Chad Gill. I'm the host of the Get the Intel podcast, where I talk with leaders in contracting, management, and anyone helping us do business better. This episode is brought to you by Laminin Coaching. Laminin is a business coaching program with a focus on contractors in and around construction. We not only help with proposing solutions and methods, but we implement them in your business as well. After all, good ideas are not useful until they're fully implemented. Joining me today is Schiff. He is the chairman of the Birthing of Giants Fellowship Program, an accomplished entrepreneur and author, including the book Business Brilliant and the One Habit program. So we're definitely going to ask him about those. And Lewis, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Chad. Happy to be here.
So quick background, Birthing of Giants. And I know we were talking earlier, you said started out as kind of as part of Inc., an Inc. program, and then you guys took it over. And there's lots of programs like that. There's fellowships you go in to learn to be a CEO, but I guess, what does it take to get into it? And then what is it about?
Well, the Birthing of Giants Fellowship Program, which we've run for about 6 years now, is for the owners of private companies. And here I'm not talking about venture capital backed anything. I'm talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 people owning a business, probably started at their kitchen table, probably started it because they could solve a problem that bigger companies had, probably. And, what they were at the outset was they were good at something. In your field, it might be carpentry or electrician. And then they brought 2 or 3 or 10 people together to help them run the business. Fast forward a decade, and they're not really carpenters anymore. They really run a business. And that business could be carpentry. It could be electrician. It could be technology. It could be, government services. It could be anything. And so that's the moment that we find them and invite them into our program, which is they really are. Well, the name of the book I wrote was called Business Brilliant. They're not technically brilliant anymore. They may or may not be the best electrician in their shop anymore. Now they're business brilliant. They run a business. And what we're trying to do is get them to a business that scales and a business that you might call leadership brilliant. In other words, they go from entrepreneur to CEO. So they're running a company that they own privately. It's got between 5 million and 250 million in revenue. And they want to go from that entrepreneur stage to that CEO stage. The end result of our Birthing of Giants Fellowship program, which is one of 3 of our programs, is people say, wow, I had no idea how big my company could be. So that's really the thing. Obviously, entrepreneurs are super optimistic people by nature. But when they come through our program, we show them that how their companies can scale, really scale. And out of that, they're like, gee, I didn't realize what I was sitting on, and that's a big change.
Why do people struggle so much like with that? When you see something and they say, okay, I've built a $5 or $6 million company and it's great. I'm making money and I'm in a really good place. I mean, you can have a great business at that level and be doing very well. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, you should 10x this. And they're like, man, that's crazy. 5 million to 50 million. You're like, how many toilets am I going to unclog to get $50 million?
Right.
Right. One for me. I have no desire to unclog a toilet. But, how do you, why do people struggle so much with that scale? And is that always the right answer for people to 10x something?
No, it's definitely not always the right answer. I mean, there's absolutely a path we call small giant, where you just are a really great, well-run, highly profitable business. You're not really focused on selling the business one day. You're not really focused on the complexity that comes with scale, because scale does bring complexity. And so even if you go through a program like Birthing a Giants Fellowship Program, and at the end of it, you say, you know what, that's not for me, that's pretty valuable, because now you understand how to build it and you can decide if it's right for you. But I'll tell you, a very common outcome in our program is people do decide they want to build a business that can scale and sell. And then when they accomplish it, it takes 3 to 5 years to do it right, typically. Then they say, you know what, this company is much easier to run now. I think I'll hold on to it. So what happens is when you scale up a company to be sold, you have to start to document things. You have to start to build formal management procedures. The point is, people are calling you less. You're not the sort of center point of everything anymore. And people often say, I like being the owner of a company, because an owner is not the operator necessarily. And being an owner is a pretty good life. So there's a lot of like stops in between, 5 million, highly profitable, love my life. Even though I have to take every phone call, I like that. It makes me feel like I have an identity and I'm plugged in, all the way through to what I'll call owner, where you have something that could be sold. You just don't want to sell it.
Which is a great place to be sitting, because I know there's kind of when you talk to people about building a company, there's different models of, you're building a company for profit, you're building a company for revenue, you're building a company to sell, or you want to live through your company. There's a lot of different avenues
Sure.
you can go through. And the one you choose as your starting or their path definitely affects your exit ability or plan.
Right. And then you have, why do people exit, right? So there's only really one reason why people exit that would be termed positive, which is, I've decided I want to do something else with my life, or I want to retire. The problem is a lot of exits happen because people get sick, they get burnt, they run out of money, their economy, their portion of the economy, hits a wall. So what we hope for every entrepreneur everywhere is that they choose the time and place of their exit. But that's not that happens, but much more common is that the timing chooses you. And what you have after that is a pretty complicated emotional experience. So we're sort of like of the mentality, build it as if you're going to sell it, even if you're not going to sell it.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of one of those situations. When I speak to people about it, I think it's kind of like when you get ready to sell your house, you run around your house and you fix all the stuff that you've been putting off. Then all of a sudden you're like, I really don't mind this place so much. I should have done this
again
years ago. You're like, man, and so you're like, why did you live in that chaos? And when you could have just fixed it.
Yeah.
And I think the companies are like that too. And you end up, then you can surely choose what you want to do. But when you're talking about what you go through in the fellowship and that kind of thing, and there's 2 more programs to follow. Is it something like when on the scale that we work with clients, we see them, and a lot of times the problem that they're trying to solve is they just can't see the solution, but the solution is very simple, and it's just, you got to just go do this. And, when somebody else knows to do it, it's a very simple thing. Is that similar to this when you're talking about scaling and growing and things like that? Is it doing the simple things well?
I think the biggest thing people have to consider when they want to scale up is the idea that they won't control everything anymore. So there's really 2 other groups that will end up controlling your business if you scale up all the way. One is your management team. They have to run the business, not you. Mm-hmm. And 2 is if you ever take in outside money, they have to control your business, not you. And so that's where every entrepreneur freaks out, right? Like the idea that, they're really the masters of their own domain. And then someone comes along and says, actually, you have to hand this piece of business or this piece of your portfolio over to these 3 people who run that department, or you now have a board of directors. And in a technical sense, you work for them. You are now an employee of theirs. I mean, you may be a shareholder too, but you're an employee. And those are, first of all, they're really legitimate times to say, not for me. That's just fair. That's cool to say that. But without a doubt, when you say that, you also say no to growth and scale.
True. I mean, 100%. And one of the things you said that, you just have to figure out what you're the very best at and focus on doing that. I run into a lot with people where they're just fascinated or fixated on the fact that they're so busy. And you're like, you need to give this to somebody else. Well, it's just so much easier for me to do it, but it's not. I mean, it could be something as simple as checking the mail, to check an email, to picking up checks. How do you push people out of that and say, yeah, you can do these things and you're adequate, but you shouldn't?
Right. I mean, for me, this is the question that I have been playing with now in my business and writing career for 25 years, which is, this could really go for a lot of things, but I do it in the area of business, is how can we want this thing, but we behave this way? That's the whole thing. Yeah. And so pretty much you survey any room. I was teaching an undergraduate class yesterday afternoon, and I said, how many of you want to be wealthy? And every hand goes up. And then I talk about the behaviors that create wealth, and they're all like, well, I don't do any of those things. So it's not magic. It's not a secret. But for example, the example I just gave is, are you prepared to share control or give control over to others in order to create more wealth? And so why do we hold on to all the authority ourselves, and yet we say we want to create more wealth? There's just there. There are so many other examples in your life. If you said, hey, I want to be an NBA player, but I don't really want to practice basketball, you'd be like, those two things cannot work together.
Right.
So, I've been fascinated with this question literally for 25 years. I've written multiple books on this group of people we call the middle class in America, which is not so easy to define. I mean, it's kind of a squirrely, squishy topic, but they all say they want to be wealthier. It's called the American dream. And then we look at their behavior, and it's sort of totally the opposite of what will create wealth. And again, it's okay to not want to create wealth. I mean, it's no big deal. It's just that, why do we keep saying we want it, and then we don't behave that way? Honestly, if you could give me the answer, or your listeners could give me the answer to that question, I would stop looking. I'm 25 years into this conversation, and I still can't figure it out.
Probably just because it's hard. It's just like, it's no different than any other fitness thing. It's like, man, I want to have 6-pack abs. Well, one, you got to eat a hell of a lot less, and you got to eat better stuff that probably doesn't taste as good. It's harder to chew, and then you got to work out every now and then. You're like, I don't know,
right. There's a marketing strategy, which is called, I want to get this without having to do that.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
if you can kind of answer that for any field, that's sort of like your marketing strategy.
It has sold many things, including the electronic ab workout thing. It's like, so yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. And it's, I can't tell you the number of times I meet somebody and they're super, super busy. They're like, man, I'm so busy. They spend 20 minutes of the first phone call telling you how busy they are. Well, which here's where we're spending some time. And yet when you say, here's something you can do that will get that off of you, it's immediate. And I've had people say, it's because you don't want to turn loose of control. In my personal experience, it wasn't always that. It was, one, I had to get people past the guilt of, if I don't like doing it, why should I give it to somebody else? I feel guilt about giving it to them. And then the other one was the idea of, it's not the control I believe I'm having a hard time with. It's trusting someone to do the job well, or well enough, which ironically, they're better at it than I am.
And so I'll give you the data. The data is that as net worth goes up, the number of things we think we're good at goes down. So you take people around $60,000 to $80,000 household income, they tell us in our surveys that they think they're good at 5 to 6 things. And then if you get up to 30 million plus in net worth, and they say they're good at 1 to 2 things, and there's only one word that explains that difference, which is focus. And so if you focus more, you're likely to, you focus more on the right things, you're likely to do better at it. The flip side of that's even more interesting, which is how much time do you spend on things you're bad at? And again, the middle class says, a bunch of things, and the high net worth say none. So imagine you're in the middle class, you think you're good at 5 or 6 things, plus you spend all of your spare time, which you don't have, on everything you're bad at. And then if you're in the high net worth category, you say you're focused on 1 or 2 things, and then you don't spend any time on the things you're bad at. Well, of course, you're going to do better in those things than everyone else. That's, again, the data is so clear, right? So it's the behavior that comes after that that's so questioning.
And it's entrenched into you because you're a kid, you come home with your report card, and you've got all A's and B's and 1 D. And then your D is in, well, for me, it's going to be English, but it's
which is why you're a podcaster.
Exactly. That's why I'm an engineer. Math math, you got the right answer. You knew it. English, they're like, I think it could be better. I don't like that.
Right. And then they get you tutors, and then they get you support.
You put all this time into English or whatever your subject is. Your parents are focusing you. You got to work harder in this. You got to get that great.
So Birthing a Giants Fellowship is all about, a lot of it is about the financials of your business. And I don't mean that we get into the financials like in a boring way. It's just that at the end of the day, everyone's business is a cash flow generating machine. It has to be, or else it dies. And so it's really a lot of work to marry the thing you're best at with the thing that makes the best cash flow machine that is both valuable to you as an individual for your lifestyle and valuable to a potential buyer. And there's so much work to be done to connect those few dots up. But it does start with, what are you good at, or what do you want to do more of? And then it goes into, what would that look like as a business? And it definitely goes into this issue of, well, what are you doing today? How are you spending your time now? And how can we strip away that and then get to the thing you're best at, so that we see more revenue from it, more profit from it, which is more desirable to a buyer?
do you have people that come in? Is it common for somebody to come in and say, this is exactly what I want to, grow my company. I want to scale. And then all of a sudden you tell them what it takes and they're like, I'm going to need to hire a CEO because I want to do R&D or I want to do.
For sure. Sure. I mean, and that's a great thing to do. That I don't know how many times people say they're going to do that quite as fast as you said, but that's a place that people get to eventually, for sure. Hire a professional CEO to manage your company, become an owner. I mean, just think about any of your favorite sports teams. You know what I mean? They're owned by somebody, but if we hear that the owner is meddling in the pitching lineup, we know something's wrong. You know,
that's perfect. That is excellent. No, it's staying in your lane and being where you are. So what does it look like when you're ready? Like when you're like, hey, I think I'm a Birthing for Giants kind of candidate. I mean, how do I know if I'm ready?
Yeah. So, we have a pretty lengthy review process. We only take 100 people a year. The results of our program are almost like a ridiculous infomercial, like it just sounds silly to say it, but I mean, everyone is increasing their profits substantially, increasing their revenues, increasing the enterprise value of their business. And often, as I've said multiple times now, their business becomes easier to run. So that starts to sound like an infomercial. How'd you like to make more money, work less? But it happens. Again, get abs. And so it's happening, so we only take 100 people a year because the results are that good. So you have to apply and then we, interview you. And we're basically looking to see if you're coachable and growth oriented, meaning personally and the company itself. But we don't care what sector you're in. I mean, we've seen every sector thrive in our program because it's all based on the common activities. The funny thing is, you might, for example, say, I'm a construction guy, but when you go along your career, if you go far enough, we're actually all business owners. And right. We just have the same things in common, which, by the way, are people and money. Let's not complicate it. Yeah. And so, it doesn't really matter your industry after a while, unless you think your industry is holding you back, which I don't believe to be the case. But we have people in our program who will occasionally say, yeah, in my industry, they just don't do that. And they're wrong. I can always find an example of someone in your industry who's doing it differently. There's just like, even in the weirdest industry of all, I mean, not weird, but the sort of the most calcified would be like the legal industry, law firms. And, we have people coming through all the time with really interesting business models around law firms. You think it's an hourly rate and that's really all there is to it. Right. It's not true. There's so many different ways to come at it.
That's the ingenuity. I mean, just people looking for that different thing, the difference maker. And those end up being the disruptors and they're fun to be around. I mean, they're different thinkers. That's the guy he drives to work different every day, just because he's bored with the drive. I mean, those are the people that are making things happen.
Well, then after running Birthing a Giants fellowship program which is held out in Princeton, which for a number of years, we then launched just this year a program at Oxford University in the UK called the Oxford Innovation Conference for American Entrepreneurs. In fact, I can see I'm wearing the shirt. We call it Moonshots and Moneymakers, the Oxford Innovation Conference for American Entrepreneurs. And that's a program that's it's definitely for business owners, but it's also for startups. It's for CTOs, chief technology officers, executives. It's for anyone who has come to the realization that technology in all its forms, hardware, software, robotics, chemistry, biology, is the thing that can disrupt their business. It's really called the innovation economy. There's a way of looking at the capital markets. So let's just say you run a construction business and you do your job well. You're probably, if you're going to be bought, you're going to be bought by what's called private equity. And they like businesses that produce steady cash flow. But if you're going to be bought by corporate, meaning a really big company, publicly traded company is going to buy you, it's probably not the same thing as a private equity buy. It's probably somebody who has innovated a product, which could be a service or a physical thing, and the point there is that corporate is looking for entrepreneurs or the innovation sector to innovate, and then they'll buy you. You have to innovate. You could innovate in your business model. You could innovate in your labor model. You could innovate in the actual hardware, software, technology. In construction, there is so much technological innovation going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so in a way, while people say, maybe I'd like to sell my company one day. What actually turns out is that if you think you want to sell your company to private equity, you'll build it one way. And that's kind of what Birthing of Giants Fellowship program is about, maximizing the value of the company in your lane. And if you think you want to innovate the heck out of something, and maybe your company is worth 100 times more than you thought if you find the right way to implement tech, we have this program at Oxford called Moonshots and Moneymakers, where we bring in incredible innovation from the Oxford innovation community, which is $1 billion research and development budget. And you come along, and I remember first we spend a couple of days teaching you how to implement tech into your business, and then we show you what's coming out of Oxford. And I remember the things in the construction sector. I know that program happened 3 weeks ago. It's 4 weeks ago, maybe. And I already know that there's a deal taking place between an American architect engineering firm and an Oxford company. And they're like well on their way to rethinking something that has to do with engineering and planning.
Oh, yeah.
With virtual reality and augmented reality and these kinds of things that are happening. And so imagine, take a few steps down the road. It's only been 30 days, but imagine that architecture engineering firm really does something with that technology. 12 months from now, that firm, which might have been a services firm, therefore worth something like, 5 times profit or 1 times revenue, could be worth 10 or 100 times revenue if they nail this thing in the right way.
That's
moonshots. They go from being a moneymaker to a moonshot. So that's our second program.
That's fun. And then there's a third program.
The third program is for everyone everywhere. It's called How I Did It. And you could just log on, and we every month we drop a whole new case study about how someone did it. And it's all digital. And it's birthingofgiants.com/howididit. And it's just access to the stories of people. Like, you're good at asking questions and getting people to tell their stories. It's sort of detailed business lessons from the entrepreneurs' mouths themselves. And I interview them and I kind of deconstruct their stories so that even if it's about someone else's industry, you can see how it applies to your business.
Man, that is fantastic. Liz, I really appreciate you meeting with me and kind of talking to us about it and pushing it. Then now I got to go figure out the rest of my life and company so I can figure out what it is. But you got
to figure out what the moonshot is inside your moneymaker.
I've got my moonshot. It's just I can't. I'm more like SpaceX. My rocket keeps fizzling out on the launch pad. I'm not sure what's happening.
Well, at least you have those abs.
Yeah, but I'm still I don't know about the whole ab thing, but we'll go with that. That's why it's just up here. We can claim whatever we want now. Oh, man, that's awesome. I really appreciate it and look forward to hopefully checking back in with you again another time.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Get the Intel. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.